I'm Karin Wulf, and I've written a book called Lineage, Genealogy and the Power of Connection in Early America. And this book is really about the double-sided coin of genealogy. That is, that it is this really incredibly meaningful practice for individuals and their families, and it's also quite a powerful practice for the state and other kinds of institutions. And that's what my book is about. It's about how genealogy then, in 18th century British America, but actually also now too, is both deeply meaningful and expresses all the deepest emotions like love and grief and sorrow and excitement, and also can be powerfully extractive, coercive, and instrumental. I suspect that the origin story of this book are like lots of scholars' projects. I saw some things in the archives that I couldn't explain, and I needed to explain them to myself. So I found people in the 18th century writing about their family connections, and I thought, wait a minute, isn't genealogy a later phenomenon? Don't people start doing this like in the 19th century? And also the 18th century is supposed to be this period of like rising individualism and meritocracy, and what are they doing? Why are they elaborating their lineage connections? So that's really how the book started, with trying to explain what I was seeing in the 18th century materials. I hope for this book that readers find two things. One is that they begin to reflect on these kinds of cultural practices that are so pervasive that we may not even think about them. Like, people think about genealogy as just something that everybody does and maybe has always done, but actually it's got incredibly historically specific contours and features. So I want people to think about historicizing that. And the second thing is I want them to think about, again, this kind of the two sides of genealogy. How is it something that you and your family might do, but also how is it something that actually your local government is doing when they're collecting information about you, or your church institution is doing when they're recording births and baptisms or other kinds of religious rituals. So in other words, I really want people to think about historicizing and also the two sides of that genealogical coin. There's so many rich materials that I've used in this book, and in fact, I could have used so many more. I have an Instagram account called Vernacular Genealogy where I just have lots and lots of examples of stuff that I've collected since I finished the book. There's so much. But I suppose one moment where I almost fell off my archival chair, metaphorically because I was standing, was when I was at the Library of Congress looking at the papers of George Washington. And people have said that George Washington wasn't interested in his family history because family history is just this kind of hobby practice. It's just about curiosity or vanity. Actually, he was deeply interested in it from the time he was a young person. So I went there to see a sketch of his lineage that George Washington made when he was a teenager. And that itself was very interesting, but also on the reverse side of that object, where he traces 6 generations of his family, including some of the tiny people who died as infants that he never knew generations before him, but also on the other side of it, a list of enslaved people that he had inherited on the death of his father and his half-brother. So that one piece of paper from the first president of the United States really demonstrates, as I said, that kind of twin feature of genealogy, that it's a meaningful practice, but it's a deeply instrumental and powerful practice as well. And it can expose people's deepest feelings, but it also exposes some of the cruelest violence of the period. So one of the really fun things about talking about this book across the country to all kinds of groups of people has been interacting with folks who are very serious about genealogy. Professional genealogists, in fact, have been some of my most interesting readers, and I've been so gratified at their enthusiasm for this project, but also people who do family history and who want to think seriously about how the history of family is one of the most important and foundational subjects in history across time and space.